A win for Democrats in Pennsylvania as a judge there strikes down the state's controversial voter ID law. Here to explain more about that is Kris Maher. He is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kris, explain the nuts and bolts of what was at stake here with this law.
Hey, Wendy. Well, this is a huge victory for opponents of this law. Basically, the law would have required voters in the state, there's 8.2 million registered voters in Pennsylvania, would have required them to show photo ID for the first time. So opponents of the law said, this is going to prevent some people who don't have ID, they can't obtain it. And the state was saying that, these IDs actually are readily available. There's no problem getting them. But the judge sided with the opponents today.
And explain to people why Democrats in general were against this law and why Republicans were pushing for it to stay in effect, Kris.
Yeah, Democrats thought that, that Republicans, well, first of all, Republicans passed this without any Democratic support whatsoever, and Republican Governor Tom Corbett signed this into law in March. So Democrats were saying that, this is designed as a political play to disenfranchise certain voters, poor people, more urban voters, people who would support President Barack Obama. Republicans on the other side were saying, this is just to stop voter fraud in the state. This is just, to safeguard elections in Pennsylvania.
Now let's look at this idea of people who could not get or did not have some form of a voter identification. And many people can't understand why people don't have an ID of that sort. But if they were going to try and get one sort of before the election, were there any studies to show that there is a backlog in Pennsylvania, Kris, and that it might have been tricky for them to do so by the time they went to the polls?
Yeah, I mean, this idea, it was a huge controversy throughout this whole year. How many voters don't have an acceptable ID? The estimates range from tens of thousands to over 1 million. There have been various studies, and I'd be hesitant to cite just one because some of them were pretty partisan. But the bottom line was it was very unclear how many people might not have these IDs. The state has issued about 10,000 new IDs since March, so there were obviously some people who did need them, who did get them, and it's unclear how many people might still not have them.
And Kris, originally the judge who ruled in this Commonwealth Court Judge Robert Simpson, he had previously rejected claims that the law would prevent some people from voting. Do we have a sense of what changed his mind?
Well, I think the biggest change was, this case went on appeal to the Supreme Court in the state, and the Supreme Court ordered the Commonwealth Court Judge Simpson to take a look at this law again. And what the Supreme Court did was set a very high standard for the judge to evaluate the law. Basically, the Supreme Court said, you've got to strike this law down or at least block it, this fall from going into effect unless you find that no voters are going to be disenfranchised. So it's a very high bar to determine that. It's pretty tough to say, that nobody's going to be affected by the law.